Bow your heads, please.
Dear God, I would just like to thank you today for this wonderful class that we are in, and that as we start a new year with new people and old people coming alike, that we can learn and bask in your wonderful creation and just learn all about your absolute genius, will, and invention. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Okay, this is biology, but you're already here because somebody made you come here. And for those of you that don't know me, because a few of you are new, I'm Katie Frates. I am a disciple of Jesus Christ, homeschool mom, scientist by education and love, and you are in biology. Oh. Hopefully everybody watched their 3-part creation science series. And so you're up on the creation foundation that you need. This is the textbook that you should have. Hopefully everybody's got that, or you have one available to you that you can use. And you also should have an answer key and test book that goes with it. I think it's called a solutions manual and test book. You need that also. You have your syllabus. You've printed that out, I hope. Every week you should read whatever the reading assignment is in your syllabus. When you do that, whatever the reading assignment is, you're supposed to read everything in that section. That includes the experiment. That includes doing the on your own problems. And so make sure you do that completely. And then the answers to the on your own problems are in the back of the chapter so that you can check yourself and make sure that you're on the right track. So that's there to help you to make sure that you're doing it correctly. We'll do that the first week. The second week, you'll read the second half of the chapter. You'll complete the study guide. And then you'll come to class. You won't take the test. You'll come to class because then we'll go over it. We'll go over the study guide. Then when you go home, I would suggest you go ahead and study for and take the test pretty quickly thereafter. And while it's fresh in your mind, and then you'll start on the next week's work. If you can't stand it and you have to grade the test because you just have to know what you did, go ahead and do that, but make very, very sure that you bring your test back with you the next week, because after we pray, which in this case will be the third class, after we pray, the first thing we'll do is go over the test together. It's probably very important that you do that anyway, because I will probably give you credit on answers that your mom won't, because mom won't know what we covered in class. And so write down whatever you can remember, and if it's on the right track, I'm going to give you partial credit, whereas mom wouldn't know that. Okay, so make sure that you bring those with you. Also, it messes things up if you don't bring your tests, because as we're going through them, then you're not able to participate, and we try to participate as a class. Okay, so make sure you bring your tests with you. This is vocabulary heavy. As far as biology, it is excessively vocabulary heavy. And so I do not want you to memorize the definitions in the book. To me, that is an exercise in futility. The only thing that you should memorize word for word, in my opinion, is the Bible. That you need to memorize, okay, word for word. God knows what he wanted to say, and he said it just the right way. So memorize that. But as far as definitions in this textbook, I would like you to come up with short definitions in your own words. In biology, we will develop short definitions together in class, if I don't already have some, that students over the last 15 years have developed. I've had lots of great minds to work together on this, all you guys. And so I'll give you those short definitions as much as possible. But if you can come up with a nice short definition while you're doing the work, I would suggest that, okay? The idea is that the definition should be just enough to open a file in your mind and give you enough information that you remember a lot more about that. The study guide is supposed to give you an idea of what you have to know for the test, but I'm going to give you the heads up right now. In biology, if it's a vocabulary word, he expects you to know a lot about that subject. He can ask basically anything he wants about something that's a vocabulary word, okay? So make sure that if it's a vocabulary word that you know a lot of information about it, because that's his key, that, okay, well, I told them it was in the vocabulary, okay? And I'll try to get you as ready as possible for the test. The lab write-ups. In your syllabus, it told you how I would like to see your lab write-ups. They will be 4 parts. The first one is the purpose, second Roman numeral, the procedure, third Roman numeral, observations, fourth Roman numeral, conclusions. In biology, the observations will frequently be drawing pictures. So let's say you're not an artsy person. Get over it. Just draw a science picture, okay? Stick figures. I don't care. But, you know, do the best you can. I will tell you when you're doing a lab when, okay, you can go home and draw it from the book. Just get through it and find all the parts while you're here on the live thing. So I will be more than happy to tell you when that is the case so that you artsy people can go home and take all the time you want on it, okay? And I know some students can actually make the pictures on the computer, which just freaks me out, but I think that's great if you're able to do that. So whatever, you know, you want to make sure that you do your lab write-ups though, because this is a high school science with lab credit, and so you need to have those labs written up so that if the college you're going to says, prove to me you took this high school science with lab, that you can produce the notebook that has your homework, your lab write-ups, and your tests in it, and most colleges will accept that. I'm going to tell you that right now because I've run into students that have had that problem already. Okay, so just keep that stuff together, and you do have to have a lab partner that is not a squeamish individual if you are. Okay, we're going to be doing, Hannah just bumped the person next door. We are going to be doing 4 dissections this year. We'll be doing a lot of microscope labs. Those of you that, well, all of you haven't had biology before. How this room works, it's because that's how my brain works, and I'm sorry. This is group 1. This is group 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now the reason I tell you that, so it snakes around the room, starting here. The reason I tell you that is next week you'll have your microscopes. So you'll have microscope 1 and you'll have box 1. You'll have microscope 2 and box 2, 3, 4. You see how it goes? You also have dissection kits. Everything is numbered because if you mess it up, nobody else wants it. Okay? So you need to take care of your stuff. That's really what it gets down to. Where that really comes in is when I didn't have them numbered and people would do dissections and then the guys, I think it was the guys, didn't clean their stuff nicely and the next week the girl had it and it still got parts on it and they're like, ooh. That's why I started numbering them because I thought, no, they should get it back the next week with all that stuff on it. So that's why everybody has it numbered so that it's yours, you take care of it for this year, and that way you know that when you clean it, you're going to get back clean stuff afterwards. Okay, so that was the logic there, all right? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's open up. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything. If I did, God will bring it to my attention and I'll bring it up. Let's go ahead and start biology. You there? Okay. If you break, oh, that's the other thing that you need to know. Biology, like I told you, is full of vocabulary words, and the thing that will help you greatly is knowing word roots. And I will tell you word roots a lot of the time because word roots make you look smart when you're not. I don't know about you, but that's a Snoopy dance for me. I mean, it's like, yes, okay? I need all the help I can get. And so I will tell you the word roots whenever possible, but that is an ongoing extra credit for biology that if you would like, get a, I know the Webster's Collegiate Dictionary will do this. Now that everybody uses online stuff, I don't quite know how that works out. But the Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, which is a college level dictionary, if you look up a word, the first thing it'll do after the pronunciation is it'll give you the breakdown of the word, what the word roots mean. And if you do that with your vocabulary words and write them up, that counts as extra credit. And you can count that as extra credit on your test. So it'll literally add like 5 to 7 points on your test, depending on how many you've got. Okay, so that's real easy extra credit. It benefits you. You only want to do that for the vocabulary words, but all you're doing is writing down what the word roots are for those vocabulary words, because it really will help you. And the reason I brought that up is because biology, what does ology mean? Come on, guys. What does ology mean? Everybody together. Somebody tell me.
Study.
The study of. Thank you. Okay, so half of you are whispering it. Let's do it. All right. And what does bio mean? Life. So biology means the study of life. Okay. So then we have to define what's alive. It's alive. That's a movie. Let it go. Okay. So we have to figure out what's alive. So we have. Actually, the book lists 4 criteria, but we're going to add 1. And those of you that have a book that comes from one of my previous students, it probably already has it written in the book, okay? So let's go through the 5 criteria for living things. And if you don't have it written in your book already, even if your mom doesn't want you to write in the book, get a pencil and write it in the book, okay? No, I'm serious. And tell mom I made you. I came over and smacked you in the head or whatever. Okay, the first one that it lists there is, everybody sees the bolded list there? Y'all there? Okay. The first one, it says all life forms contain deoxyribonucleic acid, also called DNA. Now remember, I'm a cell biologist, which means I get real weird about how you say things in biology. So I'm going to have the whole class repeat things back to me because I get real weird about it. And I'm sorry. And I went to Auburn University and the University of Florida, so frequently I wonder if I learned the words with a Southern accent. And I'm not sure. But I'm going to at least teach you the words, how they were pronounced at Auburn University and the University of Florida. And so at least you have a better chance than not having heard it at all. Okay, let's just put it that way. So, but this one I'm pretty sure of, deoxyribonucleic acid. And you will get more intimately familiar with that molecule in, pretty sure it's module 6 or 7, one of those two. Oh, and do watch your syllabus, because as much as I like to go through the book in, every module in 2 weeks, we will spend 3 weeks in module 6, because it is a very intense chapter, and it's cell biology, which means I'm gonna be Snoopy dancing through the whole thing, because that's my degree work, and I'll be able to help you get through it, but it's got a lot of information in it, and therefore we will take 3 weeks to go through that chapter, and then we'll make the ecology chapter 1 week so that we can make up for it. And that chapter is, as much as I think it's extremely interesting, it's easy, and so we'll take that one in 1 week because it's an easy chapter. Okay. All right, so first, living things all have deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA. They have to have DNA or it's not a living thing. And these are our criteria. Scientists have to put criteria on things so that we can put things in a way that we can understand them and classify them. And so this is how we say, okay, all living things have to have DNA. The second thing says all life forms have a method by which they extract energy from the surroundings and convert it into energy that sustains them. And I'm going to tell you right now on this test, you're supposed to know these 5 things. He'll ask you for 4, but you're going to put 5. And I do not want you to write all that down. So for the first criteria, you are going to write has DNA. Oh, I like it. That's nice and short. Okay, the second thing, it just said that all life forms have to extract energy and convert it. Now, you could write extracts and converts energy if you want to. Okay, so you could write, but I'm going to give you a shorter one. But it's up to you. So extracts and converts energy, or you have a vocabulary word that means that. Oh, look at the next page. Page 2. Look at that. It says the sum total of all processes in an organism which converts energy and matter from outside sources and uses that energy and matter to sustain the organism's life function. Aren't you glad you don't have to memorize all these words? Oh my goodness. So if you want, you could actually put for number 2, metabolism. Oh yeah, one word. I like it. Metabolism. Living things have DNA, and they have to have a metabolism of some sort. Now, in your mind, you should know that metabolism means that you extract and convert energy. How do we extract and convert energy? It's one of my favorite things. Go ahead, Zach. Food. Yeah, pizza. No. Okay, we eat, right? Okay, and so how does a plant extract and convert energy? It's good. Photosynthesis. It uses the light. Very good. So you're sharp to this. You know this. Okay. All right. Number 3. It says all life forms can sense changes in their surrounding and respond to those changes. So let's put sense and respond. Sense and respond to, now you could write surroundings or environment, and I'm going to shorten environment because I know how to shorten that one. Surroundings, I'm not sure how to shorten. So it's up to you, whichever one. I don't know about you, but I wasn't blessed to be homeschooled, and I'm a science major, and science majors tend to be notoriously lousy spellers. I have found that to be true. Isn't that sad? But I found that to be true. And I know I will actually write a different word sometime, because back before there was spell check, just so I didn't have to worry about how to spell it. Now, spell check, man, that's a bomb. That's great stuff. Anyway, but my spell check's always telling me I'm wrong anyway because it doesn't have science spell check in it. So then I'm still in the same place where I'm looking things up to make sure I'm spelling it correctly. Anyway, okay, so sense and responds to the environment. Now, I gave you the example in the book that, you know, you could go up and push a rock down a hill and it's going to respond to the stimulus. So that's where it has to be able to sense the stimulus. And I don't know if you realize this, but even bacteria, this is so cool. Bacteria, some of them have little magnets in them so that if you turn them, they'll go back and point to north again. Is that a trip? And we don't even know how they sense it because they don't have little eyes. You know, they don't have skin, but they are obviously sensing their environment, which is a trip when you think about it. So anyway, okay, so sense and responds to the environment. The fourth one says all life forms can reproduce. Come on, give me one word that we can say for that one. Reproduce. That's too easy. Okay. And the fifth one, somebody that has it written in your book. What's the fifth one?
All living things are made up of cells.
Good. All living things have cells. And I'm going to do it this way because it might be single cellular or it might be multicellular. But living things have cells. They are all cellular. If it is not cellular, it is not a living thing. And I'm sorry that they forgot to write that in the book because then they go right to the cells, don't they? And they teach you about prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells and blah, 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 blah. So it's right in line with everything that's in the book. They just kind of forgot that one, okay? I'm going to tell you right now it's really hard to write a science book. I've done it before, so I do not pick on these people at all. We're just helping them out. That's all, okay? All right, so then it starts to go through these things. And it says to us that DNA is actually the map to life, and it is. DNA is the difference between a plant and us. It's what makes the difference between a bug and your dog. The DNA tells it, it's the information that would line up the proteins so that the particular organism that's alive turns out afterwards. So it is the map or the library of information in living things to tell that living thing what it's going to be. So far, so good? Okay, and so it's the instructions. Then we get down to the second one, which we said was metabolism. Okay, and we're going to learn a whole lot more about DNA. I actually have a model of a DNA molecule I just jammed in the closet next door that we're going to use. So we're going to learn a whole lot more about this. The metabolism, once again, that one is defined for you there, and I would suggest you learn the extracts and converts energy definition for that particular vocabulary word. And if you're not writing down these short definitions, I would suggest you do, because I have students when I get home email me and go, can you send me the definitions? The answer is no. Okay, get them while you're here. I don't have time to go home and type these all out for you. That's why you're supposed to be getting them while you're here. All right? So I just want you to know that. Now we have 2 vocabulary words below that. Oh my goodness, can you already see like the vocabulary? Dun, 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 dun. We feel like Christian when he gets to the cross, don't we? Throw off the burden. But the first word there is anabolism. And the other word is catabolism. Now I don't know if you realize this at this point in your life, but when you have a word in science and you put an A in front of it, it's the opposite. So there's something called a cation, which is a positively charged atom, and it's no longer an atom, it's an ion, so it's called a cation. If you have a negative one, they put an A in front of it. It's an anion. Okay? So here we have opposites too. We have catabolism, and then we have the opposite, anabolism. So let's do catabolism first. Catabolism tells us there that it's all the processes, okay, to break something down into simpler building blocks. And he says right there in the book that it's like a catastrophe. When the catastrophe comes through, I don't know about you, but I think of my bedroom right away. Okay, but catabolism is when a catastrophe comes through, things get thrown all over the place and fall apart, don't they? So catabolism is to break things down. When we eat food and we digest the food, catabolism is happening. We're breaking things down, okay? Anabolism is the opposite. It's when we're building things up. So after we eat that food and we break the things down, then our cells actually take those pieces and they build the things that they need for us to survive. And so that would be anabolism. So you're just building larger molecules. And if you want to, that's a short version for those. You could say for catabolism, breaking down to smaller molecules, and for anabolism, building larger molecules. Okay, that would be a real short version for those. Okay? All right. Then on the top of page 3, we hear about how plants, and you guys already answered this for me, how plants metabolize. They use photosynthesis. Now, I want you to look at that word for a minute there. What does photo mean? There's the word root thing. Light, very good. And I'm told by people that have taken Latin that the S-Y-N means with. And I haven't taken that much Latin. I did it with my kids for a while, and then I decided that I didn't ever know how little Roman kids ever talk to their parents, and then I let it go. So, have you ever studied Latin? Do you know what I'm talking about? As I'm sitting there declining nouns, and I'm going, Lord, how did little Roman kids ever talk to their mothers? You know, I'm college educated. I'm having trouble with this. It's seriously. Anyway, okay. Basically, if you break this down, if you were to synthesize something, you're making something, aren't you? So photosynthesis is to make with light. If you were to put that together, it really means to make with light. So plants are making food out of light. Pretty neat, huh? So that's what we're going to say for photosynthesis, is to make food from light. Is that a form of catabolism or anabolism? Anabolism, we're not breaking things down. Remember, catabolism is breaking things down. We're building molecules. And so when we're building molecules, that's anabolism. Okay, good job. Then we get to some pretty normal words. Herbivore. What's an herbivore? Ryan, what's an herbivore?
It would be an organism that eats plants.
Very good. And so you have the herb up front, so that's telling you it's a plant, and the ivore actually is talking about devouring. You can hear it in devour, can't you? Ivore, devour. It's right in there, isn't it? Or to eat. So an herbivore is a plant eater. 2-word definition. I can think of one word that's a synonym for that. What can you think of? What do we call a plant eater if it's, you're one, I think, aren't you? Aren't you? She's a vegetarian. I thought you've told me that before, right? Okay. A vegetarian is a plant eater, right? Okay. So that's a one-word definition for an herbivore, vegetarian. It's a plant eater. That's what it is. Now, if you break the next word down, carne actually means flesh. If you eat chili con carne, you are eating chili with flesh in it, meat in it, because real chili is only beans. I don't know if you realize that. And so when they say chili con carne, they're telling you you're eating chili with meat in it. How about Jesus was the incarnation? He's God in the flesh. Okay? So a carnivore is a flesh eater. So what can you think of that's a carnivore? I bet Eric's a carnivore. I bet he eats steak. Right? Yeah. I mean, my husband said, I'm a carnivore. Yeah. Yes, sir. Tigers. Very good. Very good. Give me a Florida carnivore. Alligator. Okay, an alligator. Very good. Panther. Panther. Very good. What about a native Florida herbivore? What critter can you, a wild critter that you can think of that's a herbivore? Rabbit. Good. A rabbit. Very good. Turtle? Are they? Gosh, when they bite my hand, I think that they're carnivores, but I'm not sure. Tortoises, okay, they're herbivores. Very good. Okay. You know, and I'd like to say an iguana, which is not a native. It's invasive species, but the iguanas are herbivores, but they eat they eat meat too. I've seen them eat little iguanas, and I'm like, ooh. And I see them stalk birds all the time, and I'm like, ooh, so anyway, okay. And then an omnivore, omni, does anybody know what omni means? Yes. All, right? Like God is omniscient, which means he knows all. He's omnipresent, which means he's always, he crosses time. He can be at any time. He's omnipotent, which means he has all power. Omni means all. So an omnivore is somebody that eats what? Do they eat plants or animals? Both. Very good. An omnivore is somebody that eats all of it. And actually, I think we are designed post-fall to eat all of it. Okay, we are told which meats that are safe to eat, and God meant for us to be omnivores. What other critters can you think of? Not necessarily Florida critters, but what critter can you think of that's an omnivore? I think of one right off. Bears. Because bears will eat like berries and stuff like that, but then they'll go fishing, won't they? Right? You know, my dogs confuse me because they're supposed to be carnivores, but have you ever seen your dog go out and graze? Come on, haven't you ever seen your dog go out in the yard and graze? And I always think, what is my dog doing? But I don't know if you realize this, that's because they're sick to their stomach. They're trying to make themselves throw up. But it always used to confuse me when I would see my dogs do that. Why are they grazing? Something's wrong with my dog. It's sick. Anyway, okay. So turn over to page 4, please. On page 4, it shows us an herbivore, a carnivore, and an omnivore. These are words that we can use to help us classify things. We can group things together by whether they're herbivores or whether they're carnivores or whether they're omnivores. Then we can go further and use another set of words to classify things. We can use producers, consumers, and decomposers. You will have to know all of these terms for the rest of biology. I'm just going to give you the heads up, okay? So it's like learning how to add and subtract, multiply and divide, and then you go on and learn algebra. You have to know all these terms to go on. So don't think you're going to be able to learn these and forget them when you leave this chapter. It doesn't work that way. So just get these in your head, okay? Use them. Call your little brother a decomposer. No, I'm kidding. But don't do that. It wouldn't be, speaking wholesome things and building others up. And that's what we're supposed to do, right? So I was kidding. Anyway, a producer is something that produces its own food. Give me an organism that produces its own food. Give me a group of organisms. A tree, very good. So what group of organisms are producers? Plants, very good. And Zach, you are so polite and I so appreciate it. You can just answer in here. I want you guys all to participate. You just give it to me. So producers produce their own food. That's all I want you to write. I know usually you're told not to use the word in the definition, but here you can. Okay, producers produce their own food, but you know what? In this chapter, we learn another word that means producers. Do you remember another word that you read that means something that produces its own food? Because you can use it for your definition. Turn to page 6. Look on page 6 and tell me a word that means something that produces its own food. Autotroph, very good. An autotroph produces its own food. And so for producer, you could write autotroph. Or you could write produces its own food. It's your choice. A consumer, back on page 4, a consumer eats somebody else. Consumers eat somebody else. So think about it. Even a deer eats somebody else. It's eating the grass. The grass was the producer. It used the sun, so it actually produced its own food. The deer ate the grass, therefore the deer is consuming somebody else, and the plant counts as a somebody here, okay? And so that would be a consumer. Yes, Christian?
Is it kind of like the food chain web?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Only here, what we're doing, because we were talking about metabolism, we're actually doing an energy chain. We're following the chain of energy. Absolutely. And that's what's on page 5. You see that on page 5, the sun is at the top, and then the plants are the producers, and they make the food from the light. And then you see, they go counterclockwise. As you go over there, you see the giraffe eating the plant. So you have an herbivore, which is a consumer, eating the producer, okay? And then when when the giraffe dies, you have the lion in this picture eating the giraffe. So he is a carnivore, but they're both actually, both the giraffe and the lion are both consumers, aren't they? Eating somebody else. And then that brings us to the last of the 3 words there, which is at the top of that page, and that's a decomposer. And a decomposer actually breaks down things into their original component chemicals. So I'd like to say it just breaks down dead things, but that's not enough. Well, if you say break down dead things, that is enough. Say breaks down dead things. Because you can't just say eat dead things, because eat dead thing might be a vulture, but the vulture's not a decomposer. It's a consumer that just happens to have very poor taste in food. But the decomposer actually breaks things down. It takes the dead things and break them down. Now, in all honesty, I just want you to know, not all decomposers have to break down dead things. They can break down live things. If you have athlete's foot, you have a fungus eating you while you're alive, okay? So it is when something breaks something else down. That's what a decomposer is. So let's go back to our picture. Now, when the lion dies, The lion is broken down by decomposers like bacteria and fungi and things like that that actually break him down so he rots, goes back into the ground. The lion, the dead lion, when he's broken down, turns into fertilizer for the plants, and the cycle goes around again. So Christian, you see it. It's actually the energy cycle that we're looking at here rather than a food web. It's an energy cycle. So all energy on the planet, and this is because God set it up this way, all energy on the planet starts with the sun, and then that is the primary energy source. The producers, which are also called autotrophs, are the ones that take that sunshine and convert it into food for themselves. And then the consumers eat it, so that would be your herbivores would eat it, your carnivores would eat the herbivores, the omnivores would eat both. When they die, the decomposers break them down, put the nutrients back into the soil, and then that's natural fertilizer, thus organic farming and things like that, okay? So the dead things go back into the ground. Think the original Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims were taught by the Indians to put corn around, dead fish around their corn plants. That was fertilizer, okay? Because when the decomposers work it out and break it down, it actually fertilizes stuff, and then it lets the plants grow healthy and strong again so that it can be back in the cycle. Is everybody tracking on that? Okay, so that is the energy cycle, and that shows you the producers, consumers, and decomposers. Flip the page. Now, once again, we already said that the autotrophs make their own food. The heterotrophs, hetero means different. And like if you have a heterogeneous solution, you have a solution that wants to separate, like oil and vinegar. And a homogeneous solution, like homogenized milk, stays suspended within each other. Does that make sense? I know there's a word that I'm trying to duck around, but you've had a heterosexual, which likes the opposite sex, and homosexual likes the same sex. Hetero means different, homo means same. And you'll see those word roots in science a lot. Okay, well here we have a heterotroph. And we already said autotroph. Auto means self. So, and troph is talking about nutrition or nourishment. So an autotroph nourishes itself. That's that producer. A heterotroph gets its nourishment from somebody else. That's your decomposer and your consumer. So both decomposers and consumers would be heterotrophs because they're not able to make their own food. But autotrophs are producers. They make their own food. How are we doing so far? So far, so good? Okay. I'm going to skip those on your own because I know you can answer those questions. Then we get to the third thing, which was sensing and responding to the environment. To be able to sense your environment, what did he tell us living things have to be able to sense our environment? It's your vocabulary word on the top of the next page. What do you got there?
Receptors.
Good. Receptors. Very good. Receptors, it tells us, are structures that sense the environment. That's 3 words. Structures, sense, environment. Those are receptors. Okay? Give me a receptor that you're using right now, I hope.
Eyes, for example.
Your eyes would be a receptor. What's another one? Ears. Your ears are receiving the information, aren't they? Okay? If you step on a sand spur, what receptor is telling you there's a problem?
Your brain.
Your skin, right, is telling your brain, ouch, pick it out, quick, right? Okay, so we have receptors that allow us to be aware of our environment. It's crucial to living things that they can sense their environment, because without being able to sense their environment, they'll be dead. Just it, they'll be dead. So we absolutely have to be able to do that, and they have to be able to respond to that environment. We said that that was one of the criteria for living things. Okay, then we got to reproduce. That was the 4th criteria for living things that were listed. And under reproduction, it gives us asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Now, once again, if you put an A in front of a word in science, it means the opposite, doesn't it? So let's start with the sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction just says that 2 organisms have to be involved. And that's good for this point in the class, but do you know a plant doesn't need to have another plant around, and it can still do sexual reproduction because it actually has the pollen and it has the flower, and if the pollen in the flower gets to the ovary, it can produce a seed, and that's actually sexual reproduction. But there's 2 entities involved. There's the pollen and there's the seed. Do you see what I'm saying? So sexual reproduction just means that there's 2 parts to it, and when you have sexual reproduction, and this is why it's so important, that when you have sexual reproduction, there can be genetic variation. And that means that, let's say you have, I'll give you a real example. When I was 0 to 15, I was raised in Miami, and we had the best avocado tree in the world in my backyard. Okay? Now, when we knew we were going to move, my mom kept trying to graft a piece off of this avocado tree. We had avocado pears that were like 5 to 7 pounds, and they were the best tasting ones. Now I found out that Florida avocados, there's many different species of Florida avocados. I did not know that, and I haven't been able to find this tree again, and I would buy one in a heartbeat if I could, because this was the best tasting avocados I had ever tasted. I was spoiled rotten. So I said to my mom, why don't you just grow a tree from the seed? And she goes, because it's not necessarily going to be exactly the same as that tree. Now, my mother, God bless her soul, could not explain to me why. She just knew it was true. The reason why is because to make the seed, you go through sexual reproduction, and you don't necessarily get a clone of the original tree. And I wanted, and she wanted, a clone of the original tree. And the only way to do that is to graft a piece off of it, because then you're not doing the sexual reproduction. You're actually, in the process of grafting it, doing a form of asexual reproduction, which you notice there is a single organism is involved, and therefore you get exactly the same DNA. It's a clone of the original, and then you're sure to get exactly what you're looking for. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? So that's a real practical application of that I actually lived through. And I just want you to know my mom never did get a graft off that tree. And I was so bummed. So, but I did taste somebody that had an avocado that tasted like that not long ago. And I said to my husband, find out where they got that tree. I want one. So anyway, okay. And then there's inheritance. So far we have asexual reproduction, one entity, exact same genetic information, and therefore do not write it's a clone. They don't want you to write it's a clone. But you know in your head, asexual reproduction is like cloning. You get exactly the same genetic information, therefore you have the exact same map and the exact same everything. It should look the exact same way. Sexual reproduction, 2 entities involved, therefore you can have some variation. Okay, and I want to be honest with you, as a creationist, it was very important that God put that in there, because what it allows, when you have this variation within kind, it allows for strength in differing environments. So it allows, within the genetic code, it allows for some adaptation within differing environments, because of the sexual reproduction gives you those possible variations within kind. Does that make sense to everybody? So it's very strengthening within the gene pool within the organism to actually make it stronger. Okay, then we get to inheritance, and it gives us their process by which physical and biological characteristics are transmitted from parent to offspring. And I know they're writing a textbook, so they have to talk like that. But inheritance is just passing traits from parent to offspring. That's it. Now, I know if you're talking about a financial inheritance, you're talking about something totally different, aren't you? But we're in biology. So it is passing traits from parent to offspring. That's all we're going to say there. Okay. And once again, the inheritance on asexual reproduction will be complete. It'll be exactly the same. On sexual reproduction, slight variation. Then on the next page, it gives you mutation. And once again, if you ever study Latin, the word root here is muto, and muto means change. A mutation, it says here, it's an abrupt and marked change in the DNA compared to that of the parents. Mutation is a copying error. Write it down. Copying error. It's a copying error. Something has gone wrong. And because of that, the offspring will look very different than the parents. It's like when you have a 2-headed alligator, or you go to the fair and they have the 2-headed cows. That's a mutation. Something has gone wrong. And so you will see a very sudden change. Now, with that in mind, I'm thinking of this right now, so I'm going to tell you this. On your biology test, if you ever see a word on your biology test that you don't know what it means, and it is not a vocabulary word, I want you to ask your mom or dad, or I want you to go get a dictionary. There's a word on this test, and I've had students miss the question because they didn't know what this word means. That is not a vocabulary word, and therefore, if you didn't know what it was, you would go look it up before you try to answer the question. Now, that word looks like subtle. And so a lot of people look at it and go, what is subtle? But that word is actually what? Subtle. Subtle. No, I've had a lot of students miss that one. That word is subtle. What is subtle? The opposite of Mrs. Freites, okay? Yeah, subtle means you're like not real in your face, okay? So if there's a subtle difference between parent and offspring, did you have sexual or asexual reproduction? Sexual, because there is a subtle change. If you had an abrupt change, what are we looking at now? Mutation. Does that make sense? If you're looking at no change, what kind of reproduction we have? You got it, girl. Okay. We there? Cool. All right. Let's see. Then what we're going to do now, and I know he goes on to other things, but we're going to do criteria number 5. What was criteria number 5? Cells. Very good. So we're going to hold our place there, and we're going to flip over here to page 18. All living things have cells. And it lists for us here 2 types of cells. We have prokaryotic cells, and we have eukaryotic cells. Now, everybody here has heard the word karaoke before. This word sounds like karaoke. So say prokaryotic. Prokaryotic. Very good. Say eukaryotic. Eukaryotic. Very good. Pro means before. EU, means true. These words are evolutionary. So let me explain, and then I'm going to tell you what I want you to know. Okay, but first I'm going to give you a little background, all right? Karyote is talking about a nugget. When they looked at the microscope and they saw a eukaryotic cell, they saw the nucleus of the cell, which is like the brain of the cell. They saw the nucleus of the cell, and it looked like a little nugget, or kernel is actually what it, like a kernel of corn. Looked like a kernel. And they said it has a true nucleus, therefore they called it a eukaryotic cell. It has a true nucleus. That's where it came from. Evolutionists believe that they evolved from a cell that didn't have a true nucleus, and therefore when they saw cells that had no nucleus, they called them prokaryotic cells, meaning before the nucleus. Does that make sense to everybody? So I just want you to know where the words come from. Now let me tell you what you need to memorize. Eukaryotic cells have membrane-bound organelles. Write those words down. Have membrane-bound organelles. You know, you could just underline them in there if you wanted to. You could just underline where it says membrane-bound organelles. And then under prokaryotic, you could underline where it says no membrane-bound organelles. That's what I need you to know. Now we got to say, well, what's a membrane-bound organelle? You know. Okay. Well, an organ, name me an organ in your body. Come on, name me an organ. What's an organ in your body?
Brain.
Brain. What else?
Heart.
Heart, liver, lung, right? And at some point, you've probably helped mom in the kitchen and you've seen liver. And liver's in like a little skin, isn't it? Which is all membrane means that it's a skin. Or you've seen a brain before and it's in a skin, right? It's got a membrane around it. Our organs are actually separated from the other organs by a little skin around them called the membrane. So far, so good. Organ now means little tiny organ. That's what it means. So a eukaryotic cell has membrane-bound organelles. In other words, it has true little bitty organs. A prokaryotic cell, no membrane-bound organelles, means it doesn't have any little tiny organs. Okay, now I'm going to say prokaryotic, and you're going to say, and you're going to go like this, and you're going to go no membrane-bound organelles. You feel like you're in VBS? You should. Okay, you ready? Okay, prokaryotic cell. No membrane-bound organelles. And then eukaryotic cell, membrane-bound organelles. Let's try it one more time. Prokaryotic cell. No membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotic cell. Membrane-bound organelles. Come on, you guys got a nod here. Haven't you ever been to VBS? Let's do this thing, okay? All right. Oh, you're going to be doing a lot more than that. When we get to xylem and phloem, you ask the chemistry students, they know xylem, phloem. Okay, they'll be, yeah, I got it. Because I know it sounds crazy, but these are things that when you sit down to your test, that's going to ring back through your head. You see prokaryotic and you go, no, membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotic, membrane-bound organelles. You know, and you really need to keep them straight. So it's important that you learn them. And if you move to it, it actually helps you to memorize it. Okay? All right. So you see here in the picture, on the left-hand side, you notice that the innards of that thing on the left-hand side look like spaghetti, doesn't it? That is a prokaryotic cell. Look at the guy on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, you have all these defined organelles. That's a eukaryotic cell. A matter of fact, I'll tell you what, if you go over to page, just hold your place there and go over to page 174. Just hold your place though, don't lose your place. And go over to page 174. That's a diagram on the bottom of page 174, figure 6.5, of a eukaryotic cell. And you will be learning about all those organelles. And you will learn about all their functions. Organelles have specific functions, just like your heart pumps blood and your lungs do respiration. Your organelles in the cells have very specific functions, and we'll be learning those. That's why we're going to take 3 weeks on that chapter. Okay, I'll flip back. Okay. Prokaryotic cells are much simpler than the eukaryotic cells, but they're living things also because they have DNA, they metabolize, they reproduce, they sense and respond to their environment, and they're cellular. Okay? So they fit all the criteria. Bacteria are definitely alive. Viruses aren't. Viruses can have DNA but don't necessarily have DNA. They cannot reproduce themselves, and they are not cellular. They are a pain, but they are not alive. Not by our definition and our criteria. Okay, now, with that said, we use this information to classify things. And if you flip back just one page, on page 16 and 17, we're told that scientists like to classify things. Now, those of you that have already taken physical science, you remember from the last chapter that we classified stars, didn't we? We used the HR diagram and we classified stars by their temperature and by their brightness, didn't we? Their magnitude, very cool. And scientists have to classify things because otherwise you have way too much information to handle it all. And therefore, we want to use classification systems. And when you use the classification systems, I know he does a different thing, but I'm a mom. I think of my clothes. If when you know all the clothes are folded and put away in the drawers where they belong, then if I need a pair of socks, I know which drawer to go in to pull out, and then all the socks are right in that drawer. I know where my t-shirts are, and so I can go grab a t-shirt very easily. Whereas if all the clothes were washed and thrown on the bed, I would have a very difficult time coming up with a pair of socks or the particular t-shirt I'm looking for. When we classify things, now you're going, what is she talking about? When we classify things as scientists, if we group things in an orderly fashion by their similarities and their differences, then we can go grab them very easily when we need them, just like my socks. Does that make sense to everybody? And because I put all the socks in the sock drawer, they are in there with other similar things, socks, I can go in there and get them out very easily. Does that make sense? So that's why we classify things. In biology, the classification system that we use is called the Linnaean classification system, done by Carl Linnaeus. And that is the one that uses, it's on page 17, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Now he gives you King Philip cried out for goodness sake, but personally I have more trouble remembering that than I do kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And you will hear me up here actually saying it because I have to do it in order. That's how my little pea brain works. It's like scripture. If you try to get me in the middle of a verse, I can't do it. I have to go to the top of it and start from the top and go down. I'm just that way. I'm sorry. Okay? So I will do kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. That's how my brain will work, and that's how I go. Now, kingdom, broad, very broad. Whereas then it starts to tighten up. So it tightens up in similarities. Kingdom is very broad. All the animals that you can think of, everything from a little tiny shrew or a bug, all the way up to a dinosaur or a blue whale, those are all animals. So it's very, very broad, isn't it? Kingdom. And then you start to tighten it up by going to phylum. And let's say phylum Chordata. Well, that just wiped out all the invertebrates because chordates have a backbone. Okay? So, but we still got a lot of critters, don't we? We have little bitty mice all the way up to the blue whale still. So we got to tighten it up more. Kingdom, phylum, class. So then we have class. That's really a C. And that tightens it up even more. And like the whale would be in class Mammalia because it's a mammal. But within mammals, you still have the mouse up to the whale. Because they're all mammals. They all, you know, nurse their young, warm-blooded, breathe air. They're mammals. Kingdom, phylum, class, order. Now you start to tighten it up because the whale is in order Cetacea. And so that is whales. That's basically what we think of. Okay, so now you've cut it down, but you still have porpoises and dolphin all the way up to the blue whale. So you got to cut it down some more. Kingdom, class, order, family, genus, species. By the time you get down here, you know exactly who you're talking about. You're talking about the blue whale. You have tightened it up. You might still have whales, and they're getting smaller. You know, because like back up here with cetacea, class, mammalia, order, cetacea. Here, you'd still have baleen whales in there. But you get down here and you're in Dolphinia, now you're talking toothed whales. Okay, but that's still, so now the blue whale's out, but you still have everything from flipper to chamois here, okay? So you have to tighten it up further and further to actually get to flipper or chamois. Okay, do you see how that works? So it's very broad here, tightening down to here. Okay, now with that in mind, he tells us how we classify things. And he did tell us in the reading that species is very hard. Let's just flip over there for a minute because I want to get it out of the way and then come back to what we're doing. And that's on page 20 and 21. Species is very difficult to define. And it's difficult to define because it's so specific. And I'll tell you another reason it's difficult to define. Because nowadays, people no longer just use similarities and differences to classify. They use what they believe are the evolutionary relationships between things to classify things. And because evolution isn't true, then it puts fictitious things on the classification systems. I just want you to understand that. Okay? Did you get what I said? I'll give you an example. They want to tell us that a hyena, what kind of animal is a hyena? A hyena.
Dog.
It's a dog. You can look at it and go, hyena, yeah, it's a weird dog, right? Okay. They classify them with cats because they believe they have an evolutionary ancestry. Well, hello, whatever happened to science where you have to observe something? I observe it and it's a dog. You know, it doesn't look like a cat. Just not the same thing, okay? But because of their evolutionary beliefs, they kind of thrown away their good sense and done other things. I just want you to be aware of that. I'm not picking on them. We need to pray for them. We need to love them. We need to, you know, speak the truth with love. But so what's a species with that all in mind? So, and the point is that an evolutionist will try to tell you that the species is like the end of the line evolutionarily. I'm going to tell you this right now. The Bible says things don't change kind. And you already watched the videos. You already know that means there's a lot of variation within kind, isn't there? You know, within dogs, we got everything from the hyena to the chihuahua and all sorts of weirdness in between, right? So, but they're all dogs. There's no cats there. There's no goats there. And so it's hard to define a species because you can get what is scientifically called speciation, where you get the species that are changing into other things because you've got these DNA situations where it's being adapted one way or another, not new information, it's just a weeding out of information, and therefore species is hard to define. So it gives us this really strange definition, and you don't have to memorize that, okay? What I want you to know, and it actually says it in the text right below it, it says basically, does everybody species? And then the second line below it, it says basically, if organisms can reproduce and their offspring can reproduce, then that's in the same species. So what do you need to know? Something within species can reproduce and its babies can reproduce. That's all you need to know. Okay? So that means that a horse and a donkey produce a mule. And most mules cannot reproduce. Therefore, horses and donkeys are classified in separate species. Okay? No, they are. They really are. Now, they're the same created kind because you can breed in between and get from one to the other, and you can get mules that are able to reproduce. Okay? But it's not a regular thing, and therefore they're separated into different species. All right? Okay. Only sick, twisted ag people know that. All right, my degree is in ag. I have a BSA, a Bachelor's of Science in Agriculture. I was an animal and dairy science major at Auburn because I wanted to be an equestrian vet. And so that was my first 2 years. And then the second 2 years, I shifted to the cell biology. So I have a lot of weird Aggie information up here. I just want you to know that. Okay, let's figure out how this kingdom thing works in. And you've got to know this for this test and for the rest of biology, because this is how we classify things. There are 5 kingdoms. And you have to know how to separate things into their kingdoms. And it's called taxonomy. But you're going to have to know, and personally, I think taxonomy is fun. It's like a game. So let's play the game, okay? And so the trick is this. You have 5 kingdoms. You have Kingdom Monera. You have kingdom Protista. I should put a period, shouldn't I? You have kingdom Fungi. You have kingdom Plantae. And you have kingdom Animalia. Now, right away you can look at that and go, what's that word in normal English? Animal. What's that word? Plants. And what's that word? Fungus, right? Okay, plural would be fungi. So, all right. That's cool. We got that. Now, this is bacteria. Monera is bacteria. That is your easy version. Okay? Just so you know. All right. And once again, this is animals, this is plants, this is fungi. Well, that's pretty simple. These guys are a little strange, but we'll get there. Okay. Now, we have to be able to classify things. That's the game. And to play the game, you have to ask questions. The first question you should ask, are the cells prokaryotic or eukaryotic? That's why you had to know that. Now remember, what is prokaryotic? No membrane-bound organelles. Do it with me, come on. No membrane-bound organelles. What was eukaryotic? Membrane-bound organelles. Okay, so the first question you're going to ask, is it prokaryotic or eukaryotic? The reason you have to ask that question, if it's prokaryotic, it goes right here. All these cells are prokaryotic. It is the only kingdom where you find prokaryotic cells. That's nice, right? All of these are eukaryotic. And so what does that mean they have? They have membrane-bound organelles. Very good. Okay, so the next question you're supposed to ask is it single cellular or multicellular? All of these are single cellular. They have to be if they're prokaryotic. So all of these are single cellular. Okay? Single cellular being they exist as one cell, not as, I mean, they can get together in a colony, but you can separate them and they're still alive. Whereas if you take a skin cell, separate it from us, it's going to die. Right? So we're multicellular. These are single cellular. Now this is where this gets interesting. That's the next question you ask. Is it single cellular or multicellular? This is the only kingdom of eukaryotic individuals where the vast majority of them are single cellular. And remember, these are generalizations that people have made to classify things. So this is most of the time. It's not all of the time. The exception to Protista, that is a multicellular eukaryotic cell in Protista, is seaweed, algae. That's the exception. Otherwise, everything we see in Protista is microscopic. It's single cellular. Okay? All right. And we'll get back to that. We're going to study all of these. Okay. Now, I want you, are these single cellular? Are fungi single cellular? No. Can you see a mushroom? So that's a multicellular organism, right? Organism just means something alive. Are plants multicellular? Yeah, definitely. How about animals? Most of the time. Okay. All right. So we've designated these. How we separate between these three, okay, so you know whether something's in one of these, is by how they metabolize. How do plants metabolize? What did we already learn? Photosynthesis. So they are they producers, consumers, or decomposers? Producers. Plants are producers. That's how we know. If we have a multicellular producer, we know it's a plant. And as soon as I said multicellular, I know it's eukaryotic. Don't I? If it's multicellular, it's eukaryotic. If it's single cellular, I have to ask a further question, don't I? I have to say, well, is it prokaryotic or eukaryotic? If it's prokaryotic, what kingdom is it in?
Monera.
Very good. It's got to be in Monera. If I say it's single cellular but it's eukaryotic, now where do I have to go? I have to go to Protista. Very good. Okay. Which word are we going to use here? Producer, consumer, or decomposer? Decomposer. They're decomposers. These are decomposers. They get rid of, break down things. And what about animals? Producers, consumers, or decomposers? Consumers. These are consumers. And with this classification system, people are animals. And I know a lot of people get really weird about that, especially Christians. But if you classify, we're an animal. We are definitely not decomposers, and we are definitely not autotrophic producers, are we? So in this classification system, even though I know we are made in the image of God, I understand we are different than the animals in that way, absolutely. But when you're classifying us, we would fall over there. We are multicellular eukaryotic consumers. Right? Okay. Now, with that thought in mind, this is how they classify things. And so it asks us if an organism has eukaryotic cells. Let's get a good one. Hang on. It's got to ask a better question than that. Okay, well, I'll just ask it. Let's say, I got to say one more thing. These come in autotrophs. They come in producers, consumers, and decomposers. These come in producers, consumers, and decomposers. Okay, all three. All three, all three. Just so you know. So if I said I had an autotrophic single cellular organism, what two kingdoms would you have to look at? Single cellular autotrophic individual. Very good, Monera and Protista, because that is, everybody say Protista.
Protista.
Thank you. That is where your single cellular organisms are. Very good. What if I said I had a eukaryotic single cellular decomposer? No. You could get it on the exception. But let's, in general, say I have a single cellular eukaryotic decomposer. Protista. Yeast is the exception. It is a single cellular eukaryotic fungi. You're right, okay? But that's an exception, not the rule. Let's say that I had a single cellular prokaryotic decomposer. Monera. As soon as you know it's prokaryotic, you know it's Monera. Don't even have to look any further, okay? Let's say I had a multicellular autotroph. Plantae, very good. Let's say I have a multicellular heterotroph that eats
Animalia.
Good, Animalia, very good. You guys can do this, right? You just have to know what questions to ask. And then you can do this. This is called taxonomy. It's one of your vocabulary. It sounds like we're doing income tax, doesn't it? It's one of your vocabulary words for the next reading that you'll do. But taxonomy is the study of classifications. And this is what you're doing here. And it's not bad. It's actually kind of fun. Because I don't like a lot of puzzles. But this, to me, is kind of fun. Because it's a matter of deduction. You know, you're figuring out where something goes by what you know. And that's how these things work. OK, now with that, you haven't done it yet, but you're going to do it for homework. So let me just show you how this works. Turn to, and then we're going to go back and do this part we skipped. Turn to page 21, and you see there a biological key. Now remember, we said that we classify things by their similarities and their differences. And you're going to be doing this lab at home, that particular lab at home. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about, because this is next week's reading. If you turn over, just hold there and turn over to page 24 and 25, you'll see experiment 1.1. And when you go to write this up, when you do the purpose, you're going to go learning how to work with classification systems, something like that. And look, you can look at the objective, and it'll sometimes tell you what your purpose is in the objective, okay? Just don't write that whole thing. Just pull something out of it, okay? You could even put the purpose of this is learning how to use a biological key. I'm good with that. That is the purpose. The procedure, for the procedure on this, just put use biological key. That's all you need to write for the procedure. The observations you're actually going to write down, like you see there on page 25, the part that you see over on the far right, where it says number used from the key. Does everybody see it? That's what you're going to put down for your observations, just these numbers. And then to the left of that, it'll say kingdom Animalia, class Mammalia, which is mammals, phylochordate. Coordinate. You're going to write those down, but it'll tell you. And let me show you how this works. That's going to be your observations. Flip back to page 21. Let's do one together. Okay. It has an elephant for us. Let's do an elephant. So you go to number 1. Is everybody on page 21 with me? You go to number 1 under the biological key, and it says microscopic or macroscopic. Micro means too small to see with the naked eye. Macroscopic, you can see with the naked eye. Is an elephant microscopic or macroscopic?
Macroscopic.
Macroscopic. So if you go over to the side, it says number 3. So we go down to number 3. Is an elephant an autotroph or a heterotroph?
Heterotroph.
It's a heterotroph. So now you go across there to number 5. So go to the next page, number 5. Is an elephant a decomposer or a consumer? Consumer. As you go across there, it says kingdom Animalia. And so, like I said, for your observations, if you were doing this on your lab, you would have gone 1, and then you go 3, and then we went to 5, right? And then we saw it's kingdom Animalia, so you'd come over here and put kingdom Animalia. These would be your observations for your lab, okay? Then we go back and we say, okay, well that takes me over to number 6. Go to number 6. Does an elephant have a backbone or no backbone? Has a backbone. So I'm going to go across there and it says phylum Chordata. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to write phylum Chordata. And that was number 6. And that takes me to number 22. So I go down to number 22. Jaws or beak or no jaw or beak. Does an elephant have a jaw?
Yes.
Yes. So we go over to 23. So I put that here. I go 22, 23. Okay. So I go to 23 and it says skin covered with scales, no scales on skin. No scales. Okay. So that takes me to 26. So now we're going to go to 26. And 26 says no scales, hair, feathers. So the skin is slimy. No. That's not the elephant. So feathers or hair? Definitely. So that takes us to 28. And on 28, does it have feathers or does it have hair? It definitely has hair. So that does us class Mammalia. Do you see how this works? So you're going to write C, Mammalia. You go to the next one. Now let me tell you this with that in mind because we still have other things to do. When you do this lab, there's going to be questions on here you can't answer. Go over to page 26. There's going to be questions on there you can't answer, and the same thing is going to happen to you on the test, and that's why it's important that you and I grade the test, not your parents. Because I know what you already know, and your parents have to go by what the answer key says, and they ask you questions on this test that you can't answer yet. You don't know the difference between the type of venation in a plant. You don't know what a monocot and a dicot are. You don't know these things yet, and I know that. So make sure you bring your tests back to me, and don't panic on the test. You do the best you can, and that's it, okay? I can be fair. I'm allowed. So that's what we'll do. Okay, everybody understands how that works. Okay, we're not going to do that this week, though, so I just want you to, you're going to do your biological key experiment, though, which is 1.1. Now, with all that in mind, let's go back, and it was on page 8, which is life secret ingredient. Now, next week we get to learn how to use the microscopes, which will be fun. Life secret ingredient. And here it is talking about that even if you had all the parts, and even if you had the DNA, and you had everything, you still can't make something alive. Only God can make something alive, right? Even if you have everything else you need, you can't breathe life into something. If you've ever lost a pet or a loved one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I had 2 deaths in the month of July, a human one and a pet one in my family. And I'm telling you, it's painful to me that you can have all the parts there and you can't breathe life into it. Only God can put life into somebody, right? So that's what it's talking about, that God is the secret ingredient. Even if you have all the science there, you cannot make things alive. Only God can give life. And that's why as Christians, to us, life is precious. Life is precious because only God can give life. And so therefore, it is extremely precious. And it should be handled with great care and great respect. And that's why I'm even weird when people kill things that are in nature and see people kill things, and I get weird. My dad is part Cherokee, and my dad, you people that have had me a while know this, but my dad always taught us there's only 2 reasons to kill something. That's if it's going to eat you or if you're going to eat it. Okay? Those are the 2 things. Eat you or you're going to eat it. And my brothers ate some pretty gross stuff because they shot into some birds they shouldn't have and stuff, and my dad made them eat it. Okay, and I'm with my dad, and my dad's not the most sensitive guy. As a matter of fact, my dad's not real sensitive at all, but he has a respect for life. I just want you to know cockroaches fall under eat you. Okay, just so you know, all right? No, they do. They fall under eat you. But so do rattlesnakes, gators, stuff like that. But when I see people just go around killing things, it freaks me out, even bugs. Why are you killing that? You can't bring that back. You know what I'm saying? It's a respect issue. And I'm just so appreciative that My father, who was not a Christian until recently, had that from the Indian thing, that he had that respect for life. And I really appreciated that. He taught me that all my life, and it was good. It was good. So, and I think people have kind of lost that even within the Christian community, because I see some young people that'll just step on something and kill it. And I think, what's wrong with you? Why would you do that? You know, so it's just me. So never tell me stories where you killed things. I get real upset. Okay, so then we get to the scientific method. The steps of the scientific method, which is, it's nice. Scientific method is very nice. It helps us to gather information, and that's what we do first, is we gather data. And when we gather data, we have to make observations. So we use our 5 senses to gather data, don't we? We observe things. We ponder them, things other than our cell phone. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, and so you actually have to put the cell phone down to observe things. Yeah. And then once we see some stuff going on from our data, we may make a hypothesis, right? And 2-word definition, and it's right in the definition there. What's a 2-word definition for hypothesis? Educated guess. Very good. It's an educated guess. We look at our data and we make an educated guess of what we think is going on. Now, once we've done that, so what are our steps? Scientific method, make observations, form a hypothesis, an educated guess. From there, you have to come up with an experiment to test your educated guess to see if you're right or not. And so you would do experiments or do observations and do experiments so that you can see if your educated guess is right. If it seems to be right over and over and over again, then your educated guess grows or evolves into a theory. So what's a theory? It's a pretty well-tested educated guess. Okay, so it's a tested hypothesis. That's all a theory is a tested hypothesis. But we already said a hypothesis was an educated guess. So a theory is just a well-tested educated guess. So far, so good? Have we got any facts going here? No. Okay, turn the page. On the next page, we have the scientific law. If a theory has been tested and tested and tested over time, and you've never seen anything different than what the theory actually has said, and everything seems to support the theory to where scientists want to take it as if it's a fact, then it becomes a scientific law. Is a scientific law a fact? No. No. A scientific law is an extremely well-tested, educated guess. Are we clear on that? Okay, there are intense limits to science. Intense limits to science. Because honestly, science is the observation of God's creation, and we are human beings that are fallible, and therefore our fallible minds can't possibly totally take in all of the facts because we're doing our best as we guess and make our observations. And I'm not saying that scientists haven't done incredible things, they have. But the only reason they're able to do those incredible things is because we're made in the image of God, and therefore we can reason, and we can be creative, etc. So we need to keep that in mind, that science is limited by the people that are involved, because the people are wretched sinners saved by grace that make mistakes, and therefore it's limited, okay? And I thought Jay did a great job here with that. He gives the story of Semmelweis, and that's a great story because the history of medicine is a scary thing if you ever study the history of medicine, but Semmelweis actually worked in that hospital. They don't tell you in the book because they shorten the story, and you know we really need to shorten the story, but he was a doctor, and the midwives had a very low death rate, but the doctor's ward, they had like a 1 out of 4 people died that came into the doctors, but if you went to the midwives, you survived. So women didn't want to go to the doctors. If women had to go to the hospital when they're delivering, they wanted to go to the midwives. And Semmelweis is like, we're doctors, something's wrong with this picture. But he lived at a time that they didn't believe in germs, and so they didn't wash their hands between patients. And so the doctors would go from dead people to women that were laboring and would bring them diseases, and then they couldn't figure out why they were all dying. So Semmelweis, that's the little get added to what you read, okay? And so Semmelweis made the observations, wow, maybe we're touching things and carrying it from one place to the other. And so as you read, he told them, no, you have to wash your hands. And he actually got to where he said, you have to wash your hands between each patient. You have to change your robe, which they really, really didn't want to do. Doctors at that time actually used to leave the blood on their robes because they thought it made them look professional. They actually used to leave strings. I've studied the history of medicine. They've actually actually used to leave strings in their coat that had blood and stuff on them, and they'd use those to stitch people up, and then wondered why they died when they stitched them up internally. Okay? But in all honesty, in their defense, the American Medical Association in the mid-1800s said that it was against the law for a doctor to wash their hands and their instruments between patients, because if they washed their hands and their instruments in between, it proved they believed in spooks. So I want you to understand, even up to the Civil War, the American Medical Association would take away a doctor's license if they washed their instruments between patients. So this was very radical what Semmelweis was coming up with. Was he right? Yes. He did the experiment, he changed things, and he saw that it was right, didn't he? Because they had a huge turnaround to where the women started to survive in their ward. It went from 25 out of 100 to 1 in 100 was dying when they were doing it his way. They didn't like him. Their nation went to war with his nation, so that gave them the excuse to kick him out. They kicked him out. They went back to the same way they were doing it before. The death rate went back up, and Semmelweis continued his work, but it wasn't really found that he was right until after his death, which was sad. Anyway, just so you know the story. Let's go over to Louis Pasteur, though. Turn over to page 14, please. Oh, you know what? We have to go. You remind me, we're going to start with Louis Pasteur next week, okay? He's one of my heroes. He was a Christian, and he's one of my heroes. So we'll start with Louis Pasteur next week, all right? See you next week.